Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today we got a real treat for you. Her name is Sunny Wescott, and she is the Executive Director of Geospatial ISAC, and it's the Geospatial Intelligence Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Sunny, say what's up to everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny Wescott. I'm a prior Air Force lead meteorologist, and I've been federally trained as a chief meteorologist. So I do a lot with extreme weather and our critical infrastructure support for emergency response personnel.
Love it. Sunny. All right, let's dive into it. You weren't born yesterday. You know, you probably got one of the most interesting names that kind of coincides, parallels, or sometimes can be the opposite of the position you're in. So your name's Sunny and you work in weather. You got to give us your career path. Take us from high school all the way up until today.
Yeah, so a lot of people who knew me in high school would probably say I was incredibly competitive. I actually started in 5th grade in competitive speech. I know that's not typically where 5th graders are, but I've been very intense from the beginning. Everyone thought I was going to be a lawyer, so that was a really comical association. I was just very personable. I always was able to make friends. I moved around a lot. So by the time that I hit 17, 18, I had actually already moved 24 times. So that was all over the nation, everywhere from Arizona to California to Florida to Ohio. My family moved a lot, not because we were military. So I had grown up with a very diverse background, being able to pack my house up very quickly, being able to settle into a new place with no notice, jump into curriculums very fast. So I was kind of born and bred for where I ended up in high school in Arizona. And from there, I became even more competitive. I was president of my German club, president of a couple of other initiatives in the school. And that ended up carrying forward when I went to graduate. I had worked 2 jobs and I was on track to graduate early. I was just looking really to get further involved in different activities, anything that set myself out of the normal. So I was in the Student Congressional Forum speaking on nuclear energy. By this point, I think what I was looking for was anything that somebody else at the school couldn't do. And so I got all of my friends to take the ASVAB. A couple of my friends scored pretty low. One friend in general scored a 7, which got the names. Yeah, I can't. You need a 32 to enlist. So I scored pretty high, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in the military. I just knew I wanted to do something intense. So what I did was I asked for the hardest tech schools that they had to offer, their top 5 for the Air Force, and I put them face down. I shuffled them at random, picked out 3, and I gave those 3 to my dad, and I asked for him to pick my job. And he actually selected weather based off of just the general aptitude I had. He's like, your name's Sunny. You're a pretty girl. You'll probably end up on the TV and you won't deploy. So he actually did it out of a sense of preservation.
Yeah. Smart man. So, okay. So you're in the Navy. You get into the weather side of things. What's week 1, month 1, year 1 look like for somebody in that position?
Yeah, so in the Air Force, not Navy, Air Force side of the house, what we end up doing is we have a year-long tech school. We do train with Navy and Marines. Air Force does Army weather support, so there is no Army division within the weather school. So all 3 branches training together for the entire year that we're essentially over there. That includes the holiday break, of course. So it's a very long, very intensive program. You only get to fail 2 tests through the entire thing. You test every week. And then you have block tests, you quiz almost every day. It's an incredibly difficult program. We have people who wash back. If you fail a test, you wash back. And if you wash back twice, you're out of the program entirely. So it's a very high fail rate. It's one of the highest the military has within its training. It's teaching physics to people without a physics background through means of operations, trying to teach consequence, teaching public speaking through a kind of hilarious methodology where you stand in front of the classroom, and if you shift your weight too much, you move around too much, you pause too much, you say too many times, too many idioms, you get hit with a different piece of object in the room. So it could be anything from a stuffed animal to pencils. And they encourage the other students to essentially weigh in and tease. So I know I'm saying a lot right now, but it's more so out of public, the speaking side of the house on my personal side versus a public speaking engagement. So it's a little funnier now to hear it, but there's a lot of different methodologies they ingrain in you in the military training. And then when you get to your first duty station, which you do not get to pick anymore now, You train there for another year on the job training. So by the point in which you're considered to be a general baseline forecaster, you've spent 2 years operationally being put through the ringer. And you end up doing, I think it was per site. I started at a weather hub, and every site required a 14-page write out through a worksheet before you could get a forecast out. So you had to be able to justify, you had talked about each model, what the models were saying. You had to talk about what the local forecaster believed could be case 1, 2, 3. You had to do cross communication with other states, with other squadrons. And then I moved on to become a lead meteorologist within my unit. So I did the charts. I did a lot of cross collaborating with senior meteorologists. I did a lot of training with our officers. I worked on some of the different programs and modeling with our modeling staff. So there was a lot to be done in any given day if you had the energy or the want to do it.
Okay, that's a lot. That sounds pretty intense. A lot of people might not know. I mean, we know what kind of a forecast is. We kind of know what a meteorologist is, but tell us the importance of getting it done right, in some of the situations that you were in the Air Force.
Yeah, we had a lot of really good case study examples. Everything from World War II, where we opted to actually do the bomb drops depending on what the weather conditions were day that we arrived, actually pivoted what main bases, what main areas were targeted between Japan. And what some of these consequences can look like in the US, we have different pilots that maybe while they're flying, they don't listen to the forecaster and adjust the altimeter, which is the pressure of the atmosphere, and they don't climb right. They can end up crashing into the side of a mountain, which has happened. We have also had pilots who don't believe in their instruments while they're flying through dense fog conditions. It can cause you, very similar to scuba diving, causes you to go a little insane. You don't trust what your instruments read, and you end up diving instead of climbing because you believe you're going the wrong direction. And so we take a lot of those calls, the military does, for our different military operations. We do all of the ops. So one of the units that I worked with was out of Yuma, Arizona, and we had 2 Marine helicopters that were flying a mission in the night. And I was not made aware of the training as a meteorologist for that region, and found out that the helicopters had crashed. And the amount of scrutiny, they went through every forecast, they went through every piece of weather information. They were adamant weather played a role, and it ended up not, but it would have been a beautiful day to do an op had they gotten cleared from my side to do the op. So there was no weather. What had happened was their air traffic control responder had actually fallen asleep during shift. And so this ended up with severe consequences. It was a 17-year-old who had just finished out their program. They had enlisted early. Devastating for their career, obviously, but that's the kind of heavy weight. When we talk about weather people, the difference between, civilian forecasting for, whether or not you're going to go outside, take an umbrella, go on a picnic, military operations, people can die. Things can happen to ammunitions. You can end up missing your target if you're doing bomb drops, if you're doing plume modeling, where evacuations need to happen. You don't want to evacuate people into a hazard. So there's a lot. If you drop a tank into an area and you didn't know that it had rained for the weeks prior, it can get stranded there. And then your team is stuck babysitting the tank, and now they're at risk. There's so much more consequence in the military with forecasts, with being able to pick up on where a tornado is. You're not on that site. You're forecasting from somewhere else. You have no eyes. Oh. You are essentially communicating. Dust storms don't show up on radar, but they're incredibly disruptive to flight ops. And it's just an entirely different pivot in responsibility. The extreme response, the wear and tear PTSD-wise on some of our veterans in the meteorological community, that blame game is no joke. That comes with a dishonorable discharge and dereliction of duty in some cases.
Wow. Interesting. What is the day-to-day like for Sunny now? Out of the Air Force, you're on Capitol Hill. Give us a random Tuesday for Sunny Wescott.
It's a little different than I think people anticipate. So while I am a Fed, the vast majority of my meteorological work is actually outside of federal government. I run the Geospatial Intelligence ISAC, so that's a lot of interagency communication. It's communication with utilities, with private sector. I love seeing the new dashboards and toolkits, and different companies, everything from Google and Apple, they all want to coordinate and communicate. They want insights. They would like to know, is their tool actually going to be useful for emergency response? What's already out there? Nobody wants to be the duplicator of effort and waste money. So the big part is getting them all to come to the table to be able to respond, getting the threats into the hands of some of our senators, some of our House representatives, for them to understand these cascading consequences to their sectors, to their regions, to their constituents, and then being able to float different concepts of what a resolution to some of these issues could look like. Things like extreme heat. There's no one answer to that. It is not going to be blocking out the sun. That comes with massive consequences that nobody is prepared for. So when we're looking at what's tried and true, what's out there as an extreme move in one direction that could have cascading consequences, things like conversating about what is cloud seeding. We've been doing cloud seeding for 70 years. Demystifying some of the physics is also a big part of the education I do. So I run a bi-weekly extreme weather working group, and that gives emergency managers the ability to hear forecasts, to see demos of different tools that are out there. It really removes a lot of the red tape that often finds its way into these sharing groups between science, application, and operations. So I aspire to be a middle cog in the overarching machine that keeps things in a forward progression, especially as things continue to get worse, making sure we're not overhyping, but that we're not just ignoring the science of what's actually changing and what it's causing consequence-wise.
Sure. In my travels, I work with a lot of public works agencies. The guys and girls, they're the first responders when there's a storm. Whether it's a hurricane or a tropical storm in Florida, whether it's I live in Arizona. You're familiar with Arizona, like these triple-digit summers where it's too hot to do anything, and they're the first line of defense for a lot of issues that come with those extreme weather. What's usually some of the questions that you get from those first responders that they say, Sonny, how can we operate better in X, or what should we look out for in regards to this to be able to better do our job or be efficient when these storms hit?
Yeah, this is a big part of looking both internationally and across different, states. Just looking at who's trying what for a solution is something that's often overlooked. We've seen these extreme heat events in every country. What is Russia doing about it? What's China doing? What's India? What is the Middle East in full doing? Across Europe, we've had, numerous deaths associated with each one of these seasonality heat waves. In Africa, in Australia, each area has different funding buckets, has different focus points. So we looking great at India right now. India in the slums last year actually decided, because of how many people were dying and the fact that they were losing workforce, they were losing a lot of their general public, and the impact that can have on the mental stability of your population is massive. So they went to the slums, they set aside a ton of money, and they painted as much as they could white. Now, why are we painting things white? Because we know the difference between a white shirt and a dark shirt, a white car and a dark car, a white surface and a dark surface in summer is the amount of heat retention of that material. So the more that we paint white, the less hot it gets. There's some paint that's out there now, like the one from Purdue, that actually cools the material it's painted onto based off of how much reflectivity it actually produces. So there's some great new things coming out, where it's being tried, who's producing it, how you can get your hands on it, what's the cost and time sink to be able to do something like painting things white. We look at the UK, they painted their railways white when they had extreme heat buckling the railways. So then we look at that here in the US and we say, how did you know what paint to use? How often are you repainting? How did you get your workforce to paint? Was it by hand? Was it spray paint? How? So a lot of this is looking to make sure that we're moving quick, to make sure that we're doing something meaningful with the money that these different groups have. Every state has different amounts. Every utility's got different amounts. Nobody wants one thing that only solves one thing when there's 67 problems on the horizon. So what you have to do is you have to try to create a cost benefit chart, which is very difficult as a meteorologist. It's not my field. A lot of what I do is research oriented, looking and consolidating and communicating, and then getting that information into the right people's hands. So I work with our boots on ground and I ask what did work, what didn't work. Where did they see the greatest pain points? Is it the apartment buildings? Is it specific condo heights? What road materials are the most problematic? Is the transformers on the poles? When we have an extreme heat event, we see the pole lines sag. Yes, absolutely. But what's another issue? Wildfire smoke getting into some of our different filtration systems. And that causes an inability for things to cool, like the transformers. And it worsens the air quality inside buildings like hospitals, homes, different facilities. How can we better get them aware of this so that they can move money to get new air filters, to get cooling vests in the right hands? What cooling vests do they hate? The ones that are just ice packs, that's too heavy. The cops don't like it. The EMS agents don't like it. what can be a solution as we go forward between extreme heat and extreme cold? What are they doing in one region versus another that we can mimic?
Gosh, Sonny, you just named off like 46 different like tabs that like we can literally park on for an hour. Because another thing I wanted to park on was collaboration. I love how in the public sector, and you just named it, who's doing what, who's excelling at what, who tried something and it might not have worked, who tried something and it did work. Because on the public side, you're not competitors. One city, one state isn't a competitor to the next city, the next state. We all can share information and get that done. Again, back to the tabs. You rattle off a lot. What's on Sonny's Google Alerts? Like what are your Google Alerts? What kind of tabs do you have open to find the knowledge, to find the information, where you get it from? Like, how do you continue to keep your sword sharp?
Oh man, so this is a big part of it is looking at all the different research articles that come out from everybody. So that comes from LinkedIn. I encourage people to send me their studies, send me things they find. So my inbox gets countless emails. I try to get through as many of them as is humanly possible. I get requests for research, which helps me to hone my skill better. How can whatever, meteorological field that I understand impact X? I collaborate with groups like Geologist. I was trained in space weather, so I work with some of the groups in that. I look at each one of our different, like my tabs right now open everywhere from drought impacts to the Colorado River sector, to impacts to nursing from extreme heat, the additive stress to their bodies, research on things like barometric extremes that can cause things like spontaneous birth, heart attacks, general lethargy, suicidal ideation, depression. There's so many different ways that the meteorological field taps the other fields. So I'm constantly reading up on what engineering feat has come out, what engineering structures are at risk, these different open source posts, people's TikToks, their Instagrams during major weather events. This is how I get some of the international weather that does not make it into the news cycle, or perhaps it's hard to get information out of some of these countries right now due to different, conflicts that are going on, but their social media is a good way to see avalanches hitting this area, extreme heat hitting this area, freak blizzards in these areas, to be able to draw in those implications and say, what would the global supply chain look like if everyone gets hit at the same time and needs X material for restoration? What can we do to pivot away from that? So I have global hot words, everything from drought, flood, blizzard, earthquake, tsunami, you name it. I've got a hot word list that's constantly pulling in headlines. You can set up something very similar for each of the different fields, and you can tie in things like data centers, and you can see every time that makes its way into the headlines. And it just really helps you to see what kind of questions you may be asked that week.
Gosh, yeah. What do you advise to those who are, let's say on the local side, the city side, they're the public information officer, it could be public works director, could be the mayor of the council, and they have to take information, distill it, and then get it across to the public to where it doesn't freak everybody out. What's usually Sonny's best practice to go, okay, this might not be good, but I got to make it sound good and make sure everybody's prepared for what's about to happen?
Yeah, actually, a big part of ending each one of my presentations on the overall shifting that's going on atmospherically, from increases in lightning to pivots in wildfires. The prevailing winds that we're actually seeing are getting far worse these days. It's really communicating, this isn't the first time the planet has seen extreme weather in and of itself. No weather event is novel, which means that all weather events that we see have happened somewhere else on the continent, somewhere else on the globe. And what does it look like to operate within that? There is no reason that we as great innovators, the top of the food chain, all of these different titles we give ourselves as humans, there's no reason that we can't prevail against these events. It's just that we've chosen the wrong structures, the wrong location, the wrong interdependencies. So we made bad moves, or we made moves that are now outdated, one or the other, right? That's the application of it. It's the infrastructure we put in 50, 70 years ago was meant to last 50 to 70 years. It's done its job. But now it needs maintenance, it needs to be repaired, it needs to be replaced. That's new cost. And we didn't want to have to come to this point because honestly, a lot of us, when we put in the material, my generation as a millennial actually grew up with a lot of these structures. So being aware now that these structures are outdated makes sense. But looking at it as a cost, if you're coming in to own a business, operate a business, become a critical infrastructure public works, where are these dams at that are 105 years old? Where are the roadways at that were put in before World War II? These are going to fall apart. They just are. They can only go through so many freeze thaw cycles. They can only take so many hits. We know this. But it does not mean that it has to break violently. It does not mean that we have to be surprised when it breaks. It just means that we have to bring the public in for these conversations. What are they seeing? What would they like to see done? If we need to do construction at mass scale, what's some feedback that they have? They often feel like they're completely left out of the loop in these conversations. They feel like we're hiding things. They feel like we're out to get them, that we're doing these actions out of malice to inconvenience them. And it's because we're just operating as if they're just pawns to be played with. And I understand that as somebody who gets surprised when my energy sector does something near my house. And I'm like, why didn't I know about this? And I get upset. I have to understand that I like having energy to my house, and sometimes the consequence of that is inconvenience, but there should be better communication one to the other. And if you talk to any utility, they'll agree. You talk to any major owner or operator of our critical infrastructure, it's a process. You have so much turnover in staff. You don't want to say the wrong thing. There's always the worry of legality. There is who's out to get you. I understand it. I do. I'm just trying to find that middle ground of bringing in everybody, or as many people as want to be, in the conversation so that we're able to have this honest dialogue.
Yeah. No, you're speaking my language with the aging infrastructure, and also just alerting the public of like, hey, we know you guys feel like you're neglected and left out, and that, big bad government, but hey, we're actually here to help, to move society forward. Let's say you're at a dinner party and you got to pull out a statistic or a story or a case study just to dazzle everybody. What's usually Sunny's like go to, like this? Okay, she's smiling. What's usually that go to?
I used to be
Besides
told all
the
the time. Yeah, I have a lot of weather themed jewelry, which I'll wear to parties, and people will comment and they'll be like, oh, that's cute. And I'm like, oh, my name's Sunny and I'm a meteorologist. And they get a big kick out of it. They'll ask how I got my name, and I tell them it's all coincidence. I'm not actually an SUNNY by birth. I was SONNY. I was actually named after my grandfather. They anticipated I'd be a boy. So when I came out as a girl, they panicked and they changed my name last minute. So my birth certificate, my social security card didn't match because they pre-filled out the paperwork. But one of the stats that I like to float to people is, especially when I get told, I'm probably no fun at dinner parties, there's a fun way to turn weather on its head, which is, some of the generations, especially those older than mine, and mine included, enjoy drinking. So you get to say, okay, for every 10,000 you're off, you have to take a drink. How many anthrax-filled reindeer are thawing in the tundra of Russia right now due to the abnormal heat swings?
What?
It's more than 72,000. So most of the time, everyone's like, why are they filled with anthrax? And I'm like, well, it grows naturally, didn't you know? And then I get to talk about the island with scientific experiments that were done on it that was lost control of, and then talk about the other island in the UK where they did the exact same thing and they had to slash and burn the entire island. Then you have all these reindeer and the nomads were eating them, and they all had to be air evac'd into Moscow, and it became this whole thing in Russia. And you get to explain things like we have mass graves for the Spanish flu up in Alaska. And they're like, why are you talking about disease? And I get to say, because epidemiology and meteorology go hand in hand. Disease moves with weather. Your vectors, your bats, your rats, your cats, your cows, all of them move with different weather phenomena. Drought, floods, thunderstorms move bats coven to coven. So with things like the Ebola crisis, a major thunderstorm would drive a contaminated bat numerous covens over, and tracking that disease would become very difficult. So that's a fun way to draw in usually at least a handful of people.
Yeah, a handful. That's a whole podcast. I would have thought you would have said, oh, I can go outside and tell what temperature it is just by sticking my finger in there.
Yeah, there's way more ways to make it funny and engaging, and then people get all panicky, and then you can do more drinking games.
Okay. What's usually the main skill set somebody should pick up? Like, let's say a youngster is in your office and say, Sonny, I want to be you one day. I want to be Sonny Wescott one day. What's usually the skill set you would say you should pick up this to be successful at what I currently do?
Never be afraid to speak your science. And I don't care if your science is a hobby like Warhammer 40K, right? That I'm going to count that because that touches on different levels of physics And there's different ways to communicate every type of nerddom. People, in the Star Wars field, people who are all the way through engineering of various capacities, people who do lineman work, people who do restoration, utility work, everything from your general operating of the trash cycle. Even you look at waste management as a whole field, and people don't want to talk about it because they think others will find it boring. And I personally encourage everybody to come to the table and be able to just tell us, something that you think we don't know about your job, because I love to hear about the ins and outs of other people's work. I think that there's a way that my field touches their field, and I think that they often forget how much their field touches others, or just the passion of it. Because the moment I hear somebody talk passionately about a topic, I can learn how to better communicate my own. So every new generation coming
100%.
in should just be listening for different ways to speak. You want to see, are they using their hands more? How are they engaging people? What about that topic seems interesting? Can I draw a similar comparable to my topic? Be able to talk to people more often from different generations, backgrounds, fields of work. Just be hungry for that.
I'm hearing a lot of soft skills, which is what I'm a huge proponent. And I feel like hard skills, and especially with AI, like it's going to be easier to attain hard skills as we go on, or sometimes not even have to attain them, but it's already done for you. You just got to show up. What's Sunny's, I guess, recommendation or advice for those who want to get better on the soft skills side? It could be communicating with your coworkers, communicating with bosses, communicating with the public, public speaking, writing an email. What's usually Sunny's 30-second pitch on why you should get good at soft skills versus always diving deep into the hard skills?
Becoming a little too ingrained as a technical expert will leave you speaking technically, and people will not understand what you're saying. And if you don't learn how to bring that technical talk down to the public level, you're, not to say you're useless, but you're only useful within your field. And that makes it very difficult to have those cross-line communications. Go to networking events that aren't your network. Just see how they talk, what they talk about, and just put yourself in uncomfortable situations to break that. And I think that you're going to find a lot of times, the more you lean into being uncomfortable, the less often you will be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us tactical advice and actual things to do, because that, the listeners love that. Not normal. You said that earlier in the show. You said as a youngster, young Sonny was like, I don't want to be average. I don't want to be normal. I want to do what I do. I can still see that within you today. How does somebody execute on that when you're, let's say 30, 35, 40 years old, you're in a corporate job, everybody's cubicle looks alike, but they don't want to be normal anymore? How can they start to, I guess, like you said, speak your science and be yourself and still excel and not be that whack-a-mole that gets whacked on the head?
Yeah, there's a couple of my friends who will use the phrase, like, what would Sunny do? Would Sunny tolerate this? Would Sunny speak up? Would Sunny, X, Y? And I love that. It doesn't work for everybody. Some people are really afraid of consequence, and that's absolutely fine. I used to use the phrase, the worst case scenario is you die. And if that's not on the table with the action you're about to take, it's not that bad. Are they going to hit you? No, then it's not that bad. So if I'm getting into an argument at work and I'm weighing it out, I'm like, the worst case scenario with this is I get fired. Does this person have the authority based off of this interaction to fire me? And if that's not on the table, the worst case scenario is a write-up. And therein that gives me a little bit more ability to stomach what's happening, to be able to be a bit more assertive with where I'm at in my thought process, to push back against something that I think is out of line or improper. But even in your day in, day out with your friend circles, your family, your loved ones, when you're interacting with people, I think there's a lot of times that we just let something slide that maybe should not have gotten past us. They say something about your field, they downplay what it is that you do for work. Any of that sort of just knocks you down a peg. That does not need to be happening. And I feel like we've kind of lost accountability for the things that not only come out of our mouth, but the way that we engage with others. And I want to see more people, I want to see more standing up. I honestly do. And I understand the consequence matrix. So let's say that you pick up a new hobby, show up to that hobby with all of you. Like I want to learn how to dance. I'm not artistic. I can't draw, sing, dance, paint. I'm not good at any of it. It stresses me out. It makes me freak out a little bit. Everyone's got an art they're good at naturally. Mine is oration. I'm a great speaker. Everyone's got at least one. Find one that you're not good at. and tap into it a little bit. You know, I don't dance, but I go to country bars and I watch people dance and I try to figure out the mechanics of it because it's fun. And then I talk to them about it. I'm probably not going to do it on my own, but I like to at least put myself in the environment. I'll go to paint and sips. I don't know why my paintings come out wrong, but I try.
No, that's great. Oh, interest-based groups. You know, pre-call, you kind of alluded towards people, whether you're before your career, in your career, after your career, don't be bored. Get into something, do something. Tell us about some of the interest-based groups that you're a part of and pretty much why people should join.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. I just got into 40K kind of humorously. I found out how many of my friends were into it, which a little shocking. I kind of had hoped that they would have reached out with a nerdum, or I would have seen posts that I would have known that they had that interest, and I didn't. And a lot of them were like, well, you know, it seems embarrassing. What if people think I'm a dork? And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't be friends. But you know, in all fairness, I cosplay. So I go to Comic Cons, I go to anime conventions, I dress up as like a barbarian, a Viking, a warrior. You'll see me in various different things. I'm trying to work on Wonder Woman now. There's different nerddoms I tap. I like to go to different outing events. Like I mentioned, I go to the country bars. I just in general like to socialize wherever I can. I talk to people on the metro. Some people, you know, I don't go up and like make somebody take off their headphones, but if somebody wants to talk to me, I openly engage with them. I won't hold back. Somebody comes up and talks to me at the bar, I'm going to talk weather at them probably because they'll probably say something about the weather. Pick up a hobby from any range, right? There's board game groups on Meetup. There's different public events for all different age categories that are out there nowadays. You know, you can go to sporting events and try to make friends. I know it's hard as an adult to expand your friend circle, and not to say you have to call everyone a friend, but to be able to have outings, to be able to go on a small adventure even is way more fun with a group that's larger than 3. In my opinion, I'm an extrovert. Let's say you're an introvert. There are online B-rated horror film groups where you can sit and somebody will play it and you have a chat room and you get to just talk, you know, you go mad about whatever's going on in the movie. And that's a lot of fun too. It doesn't have to be in person if you don't want it to be, but there's groups for everything. Join a few, try them out, pick up a new interest. Lean on your friends. Ask your friends what interests they have. I didn't know about the 40K thing. And now that I'm getting into it, all my friends are sending me links, videos to watch. The thing is massive. There's books up, you know, there's so many books. I didn't even know that they had circles of authors committed. I don't know how I can get this in the meteorological community, but I think I can mimic it.
Speaking of meteorological community, let's talk misconceptions about what you do. You meet somebody at a Comic-Con. You're on the floor. They're dressed up as Superman and you're Batman. And they say, well, Batman, what do you do professionally? And you say, I'm the executive director of the Geospatial Intelligence Information Sharing and Analysis Center. What do you think they think when you tell them that?
I do get, and I'm pretty aggressive about, I'm aggressive about everything. I'll lead with that. I have so many weapons in my house that are medieval themed. I have a mace. I have a Morning Star. I've got a halberd. But when people come up to me and they say things like, oh, you're a meteorologist, I wish I could be paid to be wrong 50% of the time. And I get physically unhappy. There's more insults with some of our scientific fields than I think that there should be. You know, I would never say something like that to anybody in their field. I would never immediately assume they're incompetent. And to do that is usually, they don't understand what's coming out of their mouth. And I'm always the first one to educate them. But to tell people, the moment you start into the conversation of what weather is, how it's applicable, you can bring it from impacts to the human body. So I do a lot with barometric extremes and people who feel sleepy when it rains. Is it actually rain, or is it the barometric low, who get headaches when a storm is coming and think that they can tell the weather?
What about allergies?
Yeah, allergies, 100%. The mucous membrane buildup. Our military, our first responders who have joint issues from just the amount of wear and tear on their body, they can also feel when certain weather events are coming. The police know it with high pressures and with the moon cycle, with full moon specifically. Why do we staff up and know everyone's going to be crazy? Because the way it interacts with the moisture in our body, the way that it pulls water from the surface of the earth.
No way.
So there are correlations you can draw in. You can be like, oh, you think you know weather, but really all you know is your hyper local area. So I try to explain to them the mesophysical side. I'm like, well, actually, if you back it up, did you know that the blizzard in Russia has to come here at some point? How long do you think it takes for a storm in Russia to make it over to the US? Where do you think our hurricanes go? when they are done here in the US. And you get to kind of walk them through the thought process. And that part really breaches their misconceptions about what weather is and how hyper localized that they've become when it comes to conversating about physics.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area. What city? What part of the country you're in?
I'm over in Virginia.
Yeah. Let's say the most trafficked area of your area of Virginia. What ask of your community in regards to meteorology would you put on this billboard?
Ooh, definitely a lot more in the way of the public safety training. So like our CERT courses, the community engagement side, we have great instructors from emergency management who try to create community leaders, people that we know will be icons in the community should there be a disaster. The last thing that you want is your house floods, your neighbor's house floods, your other neighbor's house floods, and none of you know where to go. You don't know any of the offline maps because we've really moved away from that. You don't know if the road is closed in one direction. What's another route to take? You're so used to taking that route.
100%.
That
Yeah.
store is closed. My son pointed out the other day, he had no idea how some of the stores way out in the rural areas even got goods to sell. He's like, where are they? What if they run out? And I was like, no, the trucker network is what delivers that. So if a road goes down, the truck can't get to them, they will run out. That's the bigger problem, is
Yeah.
kind of bringing the community into our emergency management field. And this can be anybody. High schoolers are welcome as well as some of our seniors. You can join at any stage in your life. You can join at any capability, capacity. Your home doesn't have to be the resilient home. What we need is volunteers, essentially, that during a disaster, you'll help guide people when the opportunity arises. You'll show up at shelters. You'll, in a lot of cases, you'll just be the words of wisdom to help bring people down from the panic that we all go through when everything gets turned on its side.
Sure. Speaking of panic, what's Sonny's inbox look like during like a major headline event? Is family and friends, are they reaching out and saying, Sonny, is this valid? What's really going on? Because we all think when we have somebody that works for the government, we can hit them up and say, hey, what's really going on, or what's happening with this? So what's usually that inbox like when something happens?
I do get a lot of those questions. I will often create little playbooks for people of different live resources so they can track things. Like over in Virginia today, we had tornado watches issued all the way through DC, and all of my friends were like, are we actually going to get a tornado? And my response was, we've already had 2 down south. And they're like, well, Virginia doesn't get them. And I have to show them, yes, we do. Here are all the maps of all the tornadoes that we've gotten, which, we have fantastic data sets for. My response is for them, hey, there's just a lot of energy available. You've noticed it's been very hot. We had severe weather, then a blizzard just the other week in Maryland. So when we're talking about understanding the threat, would you rather be aware that tornadoes are possible or be blindsided by a tornado? Because a lot of the times, people don't know this, but meteorologically, tornadoes, you don't have to give more than a 10-minute lead time for a tornado touchdown. So 10 minutes is not a lot of time to get your family, your paperwork, your everything into the bathroom or into the basement. You're anticipating, if we give you enough lead time to get everything ready, to do your grocery shopping, to get off the roads. The goal is we have to give you as much heads up that there's enough potential. And people get upset when it doesn't happen. Would you really rather it happen? Would you rather the tornado hit your house so that you feel the meteorologist did a justifiable job?
Right.
I'd rather warn you and it not happen than any other category out there. But on that side, when somebody reaches out, so many people do, right? And I love it. I tell them to all the time, I'll connect you to the person that you want. I'll connect you to the live data you want. If you want to just track tornadoes, you care about nothing else, tornadohq.com only cares about that. They have a severe weather page. Let's say that you want to focus on all the watches, warnings, advisories. What hour do you really need to be concerned? All of that, I'll point you in the right page. I'll show you the checklist you need to have for your house that's on ready.gov. I will point you to where the resources are. I'll show you what model is saying what. I'll walk you through it so that your agency, your hospital, your site, even you as just somebody who's in the community talking to everyone else, because I know a lot of them are, I'd rather them have the data than for them to discount or just take my word for it. Never take my word for it. That's ridiculous. That'd be like picking any other favorite meteorologist. No shade to Jim Cantori, but never put all your eggs in one basket. Always look at as much information. I recommend 3 to 5 sources for any given event that you're skeptical of. It's healthy to be skeptical. Look into it a bit further and then use that to communicate to others. That's the spread of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm sure all the listeners out here want to be Sonny Wescott now because you're the best meteorologist they've ever heard. But I always like to ask, for those who are highly competent like yourself, who's the Michael Jordan of meteorology? Who does Sonny look up to go, man, I wish I could be like them one day?
Oh my goodness. So I do have this one rock star in weather that I read a lot of his papers when I was just getting into actual research outside of military operations. And I was looking at things like sargassum, which is the seaweed, and how it clogs up things and why it forms, where it forms, how it's getting worse, what it eats. Why some of our things like harmful algae blooms are getting worse, what happens with algae blooms when they deteriorate, do we inhale them, do they aerosolize, what kind of medical issues arise from that. I just wanted to know more about things I didn't know. And Dr. Pulwarty over in NOAA actually is one of the senior scientists, and I've read papers from when he started with NOAA all the way through his career. And a couple of years ago at one of the White House meetings I was at, he was in the room, and
No.
he is, I don't know how he's able to do it, but every other sentence out of his mouth is a pun. And it's all types of different nerddoms that he's so quick. He's so smart. He's so personable. I love being on any sort of engagement I can. I was just at the American Meteorological Society back in, I think it was January, right before the big weather event happened. And he was moderating my panel. And I immediately got up to him and I was just like, I'm so excited to see you again. Every time I see him, it brings a smile to my face. He is beloved in the weather community. I can only hope to be as well recognized as a SME in any capacity, let alone just a personable figure as he is. And he's really showed me that it's better, even in White House settings, to have humor within your field, within your day in, day out. It's better to bring it to people because you're bringing them science, you're bringing them data. That can get cumbersome. It wears on the brain. It wears you out. It actually makes you exhausted. Humor helps to balance that, and he does a fantastic job.
Gosh, I gotta look this guy up. Aside from him, people that you do know, give a shout out to the mentors that you had along your journey, and then also I want you to give a word of inspiration and motivation to the fellow meteorologists around there fighting the same battles that you're fighting.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. I will often say I've had more bad supervisors than I've had good ones. I've had there's a 48 laws of insert every other category that are out there. And within those, they talk a lot about don't outshine the master. And I struggle with that because I have a very engaging and outgoing personality. And I don't think of it as outshining. I think of it as they endorsed me. And my goal is to show them what they've endorsed, right? Is to bring to the table all of Sunny. And so I've upset more people than I have pleased in my general fields. I will say I've had a lot of, and this isn't, any shot at my dad or anything, but I've had a lot of different father figures within different jobs that I've held, older men who just really were engaging on the intellectual side of the house, who sat down with me as a young female in a very male dominated field, who were willing to hear my ideas, my suggestions, show me the trade. Dan Breeze at the 25th Operational Weather Squadron was a modeler, and he walked me through how weather models work, what they add in, how they modify them, all the different parameters, parts of the physical community of forecasting that we never really want to discuss because it's just so cumbersome. There's so much that goes into it. Everything from when we were doing modeling in Excel all the way to the models we have now. And me and him still talk on social media. He's a fantastic human being. I had one in high school, Reed Plombon. He was my German teacher. Just an absolute gem in the world. He was so forward, and it taught me how to not be afraid to just be authentic, to show up and to say what was on my mind. And whatever the consequences, it's better to have the consequence than it is to scale and scope and then try to perceive. It creates webs. I don't have time for that. Nobody's got time for that. So it's better to just be authentic and true. And then I will say Dr. Mussington in CISA within Homeland Security, Dr. Mussington and Matt Wambacher. Without those two human beings, I wouldn't even be in the field as far as I am now. Matt Wambacher saw my potential on the ops floor, lifted me up as a contractor, and was like, she's going to do all of these different weather things for critical infrastructure, never done before. He created a path for me to carve. He gave me a task. He's like, no one's ever done this. You have to figure it out. You have your day in, day out, set your own job pace, set your own products, whatever you think is doable, do. And I was just kind of released into the wild. I had no real scope or supervision. It was more just figure it out. And I, from that, moved over to being a Fed. And Dr. Mussington, every time he had the opportunity, would hand me the microphone. And he would be like, Sonny will tell you all about that. And he's the head of this part of the agency on infrastructure. And he would just hand it over to me. And I'd be sitting next to him on different calls with senior executives from all over. And I would be allowed to speak at the table as an expert in my field with his blessing and backing. And he would support me. And when he left CISA, it was a very sad day for me. But now, as I've moved into FEMA, I'm sure I'll find people like that. The geospatial intelligence, I've got Deb Kobza. She's a fantastic worker bee. So within each one of them, I find someone. They're not always my supervisor, but they're somebody. And there's somebody you can lean on. They don't have to be your supervisor. You're probably not always going to win when it comes to the supervisor game. And honestly, it may be the reason that you leave your job because of that supervisor. I always tell people never let it get to you that deep, but it will eventually.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Sonny, let's say I'm coming to your part of Virginia and I text you ahead of time. I say, Sonny, where can I go to get the best burger in your part of town? Where are you going to send me?
So my son and I have a favorite. There's a couple of them now, which is great. We were there when they were just a beginning shop. I will say Big Buns, Damn Good Burgers is actually the full name of the company. They are fantastic, and they've done multiple collabs with different groups in the area. Their salads are really good. I will say, for those who don't want burgers, they also do an Impossible Burger for those. They do gluten-free buns. Like, they meet every type of category you might need out of one group, and there's quite a few of them. So Big Buns is definitely my number one. Number two would be Good Company, which is a veteran-owned company. They have a couple of locations between Virginia and DC now, and they also do donuts.
Oh, donuts! You got me. That's my magic word. Sonny, Dankeschön for hopping on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us. Where can people find more about Sonny, and where can people, how can we support you? How can we just feed you some positive vibes or whatever to keep you going?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So I love using that because it's pretty organized and I can share a lot. I can repost studies from different students. I've been asked from high schoolers to be on their high school projects. I've done science fairs as a judge. I'm a career day speaker at elementary schools. And you don't have to put in or pay for me. You could just be like, hey, I'd really like it if you'd come to my school, or I'm a high schooler doing X project. Will you help me? Yeah, absolutely. You can cite me. I'll speak on your project if you would like. I just want to be a part of it.
Love it.
So definitely LinkedIn. And then, my emails are all very public. I'm very out there. It's very easy to find me.
Can attest. Sonny, thank you for hopping on the podcast today. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in.